Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Semicolon Code Academy, where we teach you how to code and how to run your own digital agency. So in today's video, we're going to be using React to build this component that you see on screen. So if you'd like to stay and learn that, hit the sub button, hit the like button, and let's dive straight into the video.
Hey, on us, we live in life. My squad, we tight, turn up tonight. We fuss, we fight, we make it right. Don't hate on us, we live in life. Don't hate.
So ladies and gentlemen, before we actually dive into the coding part, I'd like to cover some of the technologies that we're going to be using within this project, right? So our first tool of choice will be Vite to set up the structure of our folders, to set up our actual React application. The reason why we're using Vite is because it's much quicker than npx create React app, and it gives you a much smaller folder size, which makes everything like a bit quicker. And then we have React itself. It's basically a JavaScript library. You do use the JavaScript language, you just use it in a certain way. And it's basically used to create the UIs, man, you know. And then we have TypeScript. I have no way to describe TypeScript. I would say like it's a much more stricter JavaScript. You know, it's JavaScript, it's just stricter. It uses types. There's certain things that you can't do in a certain way, as opposed to JavaScript, where those things would have been, you know, permitted in JavaScript. And then we have HTML, which will set up the structure of our design, and CSS, which will actually allow us to give it the looks and feels that we want it to have, right? Cool. So ladies and gents, let's kick it off in our GitHubs. Created a repository, and this is basically where my project is going to be stored, right? So first things I'm going to do here is just copy this name, right? And I'm going to go into my terminal and open it up. Cool. So now that I'm in my terminal, I can actually run git clone to clone that repository onto my desktop, right? And now that it is done cloning, I'm gonna cd into it, and I'm gonna open it up with VS Code by running code dot. This should open it up in VS Code, and my VS Code window is on my other monitor. Let me just pull it here. Bam. Cool. Right, now that we are in this React keyboard tutorial folder, I'm going to open another terminal right here, and in this terminal I'm going to actually now install Vite, which is one of the tools that we said we're going to use. And I'm going to install it by running npm Vite at latest, right? Npm I, which is npm install, and I'm telling it to install this Vite package. Cool. So remember, the reason we are using Vite is because it is faster than npx create React app. It's not to say you can't use npx create React app, it's just that Vite gives you a much smaller package, right? So Vite is installed right now, and we want to actually create a project by running npm create Vite, right? And I could give it the name directly, but I just want to show you the other step. Once I've run npm create Vite, I can press enter, right? And this should now prompt me to give it a project name, and my project name will be keyboard, and the language I'll be using, or the framework or the library, is React, and I'll be using it with TypeScript, right? So it's giving me now commands that I should run to ensure that I successfully am able to run the project. So I have to cd into it first, and then I have to install all the dependencies that it needs, right? So yeah, this is probably one of the downsides of npm. it has a lot of packages, a lot of libraries that you can install and all that, so it does become like a lot to handle. So if I just go in now and show you the folder structure while we're waiting for that to install. So this is basically where we're going to be focused most, in the sources folder, and we're going to be dealing with most of these TSX files. Remember, we are using TypeScript, but you can use like normal JSX, but TypeScript is preferred nowadays because it's much stricter, as I explained, and it helps in the long run to ensure the scalability of your project. It's taking a bit long because my internet is slow, but we should be done in a couple of seconds. That is great. So I've installed all my packages. Now I need to actually run this project so that we can see what all of this produces at the end, right? So I've got that open there. Just gonna press Control, click on the link, and I'm just gonna put everything nicely so we can see what we are dealing with here. Right, apologies, let me put that there, and I'll put that here. Cool. So this is basically what Vite gives us. Vite gives us this project by default. This is the default Vite project, and if I just close everything there and I open up app.tsx, this is basically the TypeScript file that produces this that we see on the right. So basically, if I had to remove everything here, all of that would disappear. Great. And we are going to be removing them anyways because we're not using them. And I want to reformat this document so that everything is nice and clean. Cool. Now the first things I want to do is clear up anything that I will not be using. Right. I want to go into index, clear out everything that I will not be using from here. I'll most likely be using the body tag, but everything else not really. Okay, cool. So the root, background color, font family, I can actually just remove all of this. Won't be needing it. What I will be needing is this body tag. So for the body, I'm going to give it a min height of 100 VH, right, and a width of 100%, and just so we can see it, I'm going to give it a background color of gray. Boom, there we are. It has changed and we can see that our background is now gray. Right, what I want to do also is remove, select all the tags. Why can't I select all? I'm trying to select all, but my caps lock seems to not be working. So if I just say shift at right, and I'll say padding 0, margin 0, that removes all those margins and paddings that we saw. So now you can see that the scroll bar has disappeared here. I really hope you guys can actually see on the recording. I did try to make this font size a bit bigger, right? So padding, and should I give it a box sizing? We'll just go with border box. Cool. Right, so my body is all cool. So this already selects my root tag. I'm just gonna give it a background of red so we can actually see our root tag, and then all I'm gonna do is I want my root tag to actually take up everything, all the space. So I'm going to give it the same styling in terms of width and height as the body. cool. So now you can see it takes up all the space. I'm just gonna remove that, and I'm gonna remove that. Cool. So now we can actually get into building our keyboard. Right, so we're gonna go here into our app.tsx, and the first thing we're gonna do, right, is I've already created these arrays. So what I'm gonna do is these are gonna be the arrays that hold our key values, basically the letters that we're gonna see on the actual keyboard, right? And I actually prefer my return statement to be like this, right? And I'll just format it again. Oh, it removes it automatically. I did not know that. Okay, now I want to create a keyboard container, right? I want something that's gonna hold all of my elements in place. So I'm gonna run keyboard container. So this is just gonna be a div, right? And we're gonna go into app.tsx. Let me just copy this, go into app.tsx, and immediately, man, what is happening? I'm making so much more errors today. Okay, right, so we've selected our div, right? I'm just gonna give it a border of red so that we can actually see it. I'm gonna give it a height of 50 VH and a width of 60%, right? And the reason why it's showing there is because I haven't aligned it centrally within the root, right? So now we can see, if we maximize this, it is right there. Boom. Okay, cool. I wonder what is up with my body. That shouldn't really affect anything much. With 60%, border solid red. And yeah, so now we can actually start creating unordered lists, which are basically going to be the containers for each of these values, which is going to act as a list item, basically. So I'm going to create, actually a shorthand is to just say ul times 4, right? That will create 4 unordered lists. And this is actually not behaving the way I wanted to, because it's not in the center. So if that's the case, I have to, it's either my body or it's my root tag. Alright, so quick way to debug that is to just see the root. The root is the parent, right? So let me just see what is happening here. Let me close my dev tools. Could just give it a height. Shouldn't affect anything. Display flex, align content. Okay, geez, that took me long to debug. So instead of align content, it should be align items centrally and justify content centrally. Now that should be perfect. Can remove that gray, right? So now everything is in the center, right? So our keyboard, remember, has all those keys, right? And if I remember correctly, it's about 4 rows, each having keys, and then there's going to be that space button. So I've already created my 4 unordered lists, right? So So all I have to do now, basically, within this unordered list, I'm gonna have to loop through these values. And in React with TypeScript, we have to use that truthy thing, this question mark. It basically asks, does this contain any values? If it has values, it will print them out. If it doesn't, it will stay as undefined, right? And then we are using the map function, which is a callback function, which takes a value argument and a index argument. Index argument is optional at this point, and then we will have to return a list item, right? And within the list item, we're going to put in the actual value. So now you can see my QWERTY is actually popping up there. So before we move on to the others, I actually just want to style everything properly. So our container, right, give it a bit of a border radius, and I'm gonna go with 20 pixels for now. And let me just remove this border for now, and I actually want to give it a particular box shadow, which is gonna be in line with a neomorphic approach to design. So that's the type of style we want to go with here, like have a sort of neomorphic design look, feel to it. I'm not too familiar with neomorphism, still learning it, but it is rather interesting, man, you know. So we've got our basic container there, right? What I want to do now is I want to target all my unordered lists. Let me just give them a border of solid red so we can see them, right? And I want them to be 90%, so I don't want them to take up the full width, and a minimum height of, do we go with 10 VH, right? And obviously I'm gonna have to display my things in rows, so display flex, align items centrally, and I'm gonna space them out evenly, so that pretty much aligns everything in a row spaced out evenly. I'm just gonna go back into my list one more time, and I'm just gonna remove the list style. Oh man, list style, I'm gonna go with none. That should remove those bullets we see there. Right, before I move on to the other lists, let me just style the list items for this particular row, and if I get it right, it should be the same for all the other rows once I am done with it. Solid, I'm gonna give it a gray border, right? And I also want them to have this same box shadow as the parent. And now if we maximize this, we should see things starting to sort of come into play here, right? Border solid, I want to give it the same background color. Okay, I think the parent doesn't have a background color, so we'll get to that shortly, right? Border solid gray, I'm gonna make it 1 pixel. Get it as thin as possible, and again, I want everything inside the list items to be in the middle. So just copy that, paste it there, and you can now see that all our stuff right here is in the middle, right? So let me just quickly remove this, and I'm going to focus on my list items for now. Border, I actually wanted a border radius right here of 10 pixels just to make everything look, you know, a bit more refined. I'm actually gonna change the font family as well. Let's go with that one and give them a font weight of bold. That is cozy. It's getting there. It's getting there. So I just want to see something. My things aren't in the center, so this I'm going to give a flex direction of column. I'm going to align things centrally. I'm going to justify things centrally. Cool. So gives us a bit more of what we want to see. And I think our buttons can actually be a bit bigger, but we'll cross that bridge when we have to. Right, so I've got the basic layout of my first row, and the reason why I wanted to focus on one row is because if I can crack it for one row, I can crack it for the others. It's just a matter of copying and pasting. Right, it's just a matter of copying and pasting at this point. Right, row 3. Yeah, I have about 3 rows, and then that's where my space button is gonna come in. Right, okay, so it seems there's a lot of space between my keys. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make them a bit bigger. Let's go with maybe 70 pixels. 70 pixels. What the hell just happened right there? Okay, 50 by 50, 70 by 70. Okay, that seems to be coming correct. Actually, I just want to visualize my things again. So in this one, I'll just have a list item here. Right, that says space, basically space, and I'll give it a ID of space btn. Right, and now I will actually target it, and I will say the width can be about 70%, and let's see how that looks. It's there or thereabouts. Now what I need to do is manipulate the widths of each of these rows. Right, so I'm gonna go to these rows individually, go to the rows individually, so the unordered lists themselves, and the first one I think is fine the way it is. I will just call this one row 2. Right, and I'll copy this. I'm basically manipulating the second and third row, and I'll call this row 3. Right, and then I'll go above here, I'll say hashtag row 2. Let me see. Maybe I want to decrease the width of that one to be 80%, and then I'll make row 3 10% shorter. Row 3, I'll give it a 70%. Right, now you see our structure, and you will be surprised what happens when you remove a simple border on the unordered lists, or remove the border. Boom, and here you go. There is your keyboard. Now okay, let's leave them all lowercase. I will just make the space button I don't know, 70% seems perfect actually. Right now, since we are in React, I actually want to go over a concept using one of the React hooks called useState. So now basically what I want is to track every time someone clicks on something. I want to actually see the value that is clicked, right? So my buttons, these letters look a bit small, right? They look a bit small, so I'm gonna go back into my CSS and I'm gonna, sorry, let me just put this like that, and I'm just gonna make my, yeah, I didn't give them a font size actually. Font size, and I'm gonna go with 22 pixels. That actually looks clean, right? And for my space buttons, I'm just gonna say text transform, and I'm gonna capitalize it. That should make it capital. Right, so now I need to actually track the values of each, and I need a way to display that, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a I don't know, let's go with the input field. I want to create it outside of the board itself, so I'm just gonna create a, is it a label, and inside the label I'm gonna go with a input, right? And all I'm gonna do is the placeholder text, right? So this is where I can actually change my flex direction to column, not the body, man. I actually want to target my root, right? So I just wanted to put this text field up there. Actually, why am I using a input field when I can just use a span tag? I can just have a span there. I'll give it an ID of output, right? Output, and I will just style it quickly by going hashtag output order solid red. Oh my goodness, I am flopping today. Solid red, right? It's just so we can see the text, nothing hectic actually, and a height of 5 VH, height of 5 VH, right? Just so we can see the text. I'll make this slightly smaller. I'll probably just change the color, give it a bit of a border radius as well, and we should be good to go, right? So inside there I'm basically gonna create a state variable, right? And I'm gonna call it, why is it crying? Okay, I'm gonna create this state variable, right? And I'm gonna allow it to use useState so that it can actually change as things are being clicked, and I'm gonna call it clicked, right? So let me just hide this, and now this is where the logic has to come in. So for each list item, I forgot to actually give it a key, and the key will be the index, right? So for each item within a list, you need to give it a special identifier, and I'll just do that for all of these as well, so that React and TypeScript and all these technologies can actually be happy, right? Now I need to actually define a on-click property for each of the list items, right? Define an on-click property, And basically what this on click is going to do, it's going to set the value of this clicked variable, which we are going to display here. So every time something is clicked, it will change the value of this variable and it will display it there, right? So I'm just gonna have to call set clicked, and we're gonna have to basically pass in val, the value, the actual string value of the buttons, right? And now this should work for the first row, and remember, if it works for row 1, it will most definitely work for the other rows. So now you can already see the Q, W, E, R, T, Y, this. So let me just make it bigger so that we can actually see the font. Okay, 22 pixels is wild. I'm gonna give it a font weight of bold, right? So it should be working for the first row now, right? You can see things are changing. I'd actually like to make those text uppercase, so I'm gonna go text transform uppercase. That should make everything uppercase, and I'm just gonna go back to my roots and I'm gonna give it a gap property of maybe 5%, just to give us some spacing between the elements, and that seems to not be working. Or is it? Okay, well then for now I'll just use margins. So I'm gonna go here, margin top, and I'll go with about 20 pixels just to give it some spacing. And then here we can actually just make this way smaller, give it a display flex, align item center to align everything centrally, and first row is working perfectly, right? You can see our values are changing, and we will just do the same thing, copy this on click, and remember, if it works for one row, it should work for other rows. Oh man, what is happening? It's already crying. What's it crying about? I forgot a bracket. Wow. The pains of programming, man. The pains of programming. So that should now work for all the other rows here, and basically space should basically just add a space. So in later implementations we can actually make it a whole keyboard that writes strings, you know, or it just adds the string that you decide to make. But I think this is a good start for this tutorial. Our project is up and running, and all I will do now is push it to my repository, and I can do that by just going here. My commit is keyboard design complete, and I'll press commit. I'll say yes, and now if I go back into my repository and I refresh, where the hell is my project? Just believe in me. It's somewhere here. It's somewhere here.
Hey, oh no, sweet living life. My squad.